Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lawrence Branch NAACP District Attorney Candidate Forum. My name is Ursula Miner. I'm president of the Lawrence Branch NAACP. I would like to thank the Political Action Committee for putting this all together. The mission of the NAACP is to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights in order to eliminate race-based discrimination and ensure the health and well-being of all persons. The NAACP cannot make political endorsements, but we can encourage our members and the community to be informed voters. I would like to introduce our candidates. We have Charles Branson, Cooper Overstreet, Suzanne Valdez. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening and closing remarks and 1 minute and 30 seconds per question. There will be 8 questions. There will be no additional questions from the audience. We will start with opening remarks from each candidate, and first we will start with Cooper Overstreet.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you to the NAACP for putting on this great event. I'm so excited to be able to talk to folks about our campaign and about our vision for Douglas County. I'm Cooper Overstreet. I'm running for district attorney, and I'm running for DA because our legal system here in Douglas County is broken. We supposedly live in the most progressive county in Kansas, but our legal system is in crisis. We have a jail population that's bursting at the seams right now, with folks who are only there because they can't afford to pay bail to get their way out, and with folks that are predominantly people of color. And we have a DA's office right now that, through its policies and its inactions, has contributed to that massive disproportion in race that we see in our jail. Right now, we need to reimagine how our justice system treats people of color in this country, and specifically right here in Douglas County. And that's why I'm running for DA. I'm a defense attorney. I was raised in a town here in Kansas, a small town, by a single mom. Didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. And I saw from a young age how the justice system interacts with folks who don't have a leg to stand on in the justice system. And so that's what inspired me to be a defense attorney. And that's all I've ever been in my career. I practice a lot right here in Douglas County. I go into court every single day with clients, and I see how race and their race plays into how they're treated in our justice system every single day. I talk to folks in my client about being profiled by the police. I talk to folks in my office about how they are going to be treated differently by our court system because of the color of their skin. And so as DA, what I want to do is I want to create a system that values humans over convictions, and that eliminates the systemic racism that we see in our criminal legal system, eliminates things like cash bail and the racist war on drugs that's led to countless Black lives being destroyed in our country and right here in Douglas County. And I want to create an anti-racist district attorney's office. As your DA, that's what I will do. Thank you.
Next, we have Suzanne Valdez. Suzanne, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Ursula. And thank you to the NAACP for hosting this event. My background is also disadvantaged. I'm a Hispanic woman who came from a family where my dad was a copper miner, and certainly have had family who've experienced systemic racism, certainly not on par with my Black family and my Black friends and the Black community. But I can hear what people are saying here with the frustration with the justice system. I believe my professional record speaks for itself. I started out in legal services, working in Kansas City, Kansas, doing legal aid work, doing defense work. I did that for 6 years in Kansas City, as well as in Lawrence. I have 24 years total of practice experience. As I indicated, 6 of those years has been in legal aid in inner city Kansas City. I have 6 years practicing as a prosecutor in Wyandotte County, in Kansas City. I have 9 years as chair of the Crime Victims Compensation Board, where I've implemented a budget of up to $4 million and managed an office staff, which I think is very important to this position. I have 7 months experience as a district judge pro tem handling the juvenile offender docket. And I have 20 years as a law professor teaching in legal ethics and prosecutorial ethics. And so my breadth of experience is I think, important because it is through my experience that I'm able to see and understand how the practice of law works, and certainly why important leadership in this district attorney's office, especially during these really, really challenging times, and our recognition that we need to move forward and fix systemic problems is why I think I'm the right person for the job. I'd like to be able to employ a diverse and well-trained staff, reestablish lines of communication with our local stakeholders and law enforcement, free up resources to prosecute only serious crimes and do right by victims, and then lastly, streamlined admissions to diversion, problem-solving courts, and alternatives to incarceration. Thank you.
Next, we have Charles Branson.
Thank you, Ursula. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today at the NAACP forum. Perform such valuable work and voice in our community. You know, when I first ran for district attorney, I saw a system that was about processing cases and not solving problems. I ran on a platform of community prosecution, making sure victims were treated fairly and compassionately, and defendants were held accountable in meaningful ways. My goal was to transition the district attorney's office into one where, you know, we were a problem-solving office, one where we solved cases not based upon precept formulas or whether or not a conviction was achieved, but on whether or not the case was resolved in the best interest of the victim and community safety. And my office has continued to adapt over the years to make communities safer by offering more options for people involved in the criminal justice system to improve their lives while keeping the public safe. No prosecutor's office in the state has been more progressive and more forward-thinking than our office has. In 2017, I was instrumental in the creation of a nationally recognized behavioral health court to assist people with serious mental illness and mental health issues avoid criminal convictions while obtaining treatment they needed. In 2018, I created a first-of-its-kind women's substance use disorder diversion program, a program about getting addicted women out of our jail and into wraparound treatment services where they can reclaim their lives and get on with their lives without a criminal conviction. You know, we also this year launched a new drug court program. It's a pilot program that's in its infancy. They've been around for a while, but we had a judge willing to take the steps to create a program. And we've also joined the Governmental Alliance on Race and Equity to look at the systems in place in our criminal justice system and how we can take action to reduce the disparate impact of the criminal justice system on minority and the poor. I've worked tirelessly through the years to create change and adopt my office to expectations of the community, and I'll continue to do so.
Thank you for the opening remarks. Now we will start with the questions. Question 1. What do you see as your role in addressing the overcrowding problem with the Douglas County Jail? We will start with Charles Branson.
Well, we've already taken some significant steps in trying to reduce our jail population. We've already decreased our jail population with our pretrial release program, but frankly, that's just not enough. The jail has to be the last resort for law enforcement, not the first. We have a jail that's been able to maintain a lower population during the COVID crisis, in part because law enforcement's using arrest less and booking fewer people into the jail. Our population right now is about 147. That's not made our community less safe. You know, we're still getting police reports. We're still able to charge cases, send a summons if we need to bring somebody to court, and that person may be able to avoid jail altogether. You know, as DA, I will encourage the use of cite and release by our local law enforcement whenever possible. I'm also part of the Kansas Supreme Court Pretrial Justice Task Force. One of the recommendations that we will be making later this year is to change Kansas law to make cite and release the norm. And I will advocate for that at the state legislature. You know, my office has also started prioritizing lower level cases where defendants are being held because failed to appear in court, where the judge has issued a warrant for their appearance. When someone's arrested, it may take a week or longer before we can get them back in front of the judge. And we are creating a process to prioritize those cases to where we can know when they enter the jail that we can try to get them back in front of the judge as quickly as possible. We have to reduce that amount of time.
Next, we will have Suzanne Valdez.
So yeah, I think I have two things I'd like to say. One, I think we got to do better at having a multidisciplinary response team with law enforcement, because I think that's going to help alleviate a lot of, sort of de-escalate situations, and certainly alleviate the jail population, because if we've got other experts who are responding besides law enforcement, who are experts in certain areas, for example, like domestic violence or something like that, I think that we should really think about those ideas, and hopefully that will sort of redirect those issues outside of the criminal justice system, and certainly outside of jail, so that we're not booking. I also think that law enforcement needs to have, and they want to have, after I've talked with many law enforcement officers, is they want to have better guidance on who to book and why. And I think that that's absolutely true, that we need to really think about what is a serious offense where someone needs to be booked, and what's an offense where we can keep people out of jail and give them either a notice to appear or the equivalent, the sign and release, as Mr. Branson's been talking about. We just got to quit booking people into jail. But I also think that there hasn't been clear guidance to law enforcement from the district attorney's office about what those kinds of crimes are. And I think if we work on that together, we can establish that and clearly see a lower booking, and certainly help with the overcrowding problem.
Okay, I'll repeat the question again if someone just came on. What do you see as your role in addressing the overcrowding problem with Douglas County Jail? Cooper Overstreet?
Thank you. Well, the district attorney is the individual responsible for who goes into that jail and who doesn't. And as my platform as district attorney is a platform of decarceration of our local county jail, because we know that across this country and right here in Douglas County, local county jails are the front door to mass incarceration in this country. And so it first and foremost starts with how we're treating people who are arrested in our system, and whether or not we're making it so they can't get out of the jail because they can't afford to pay a cash bond. That's why in my office, I will work to eliminate the use of cash bail in Douglas County. It's a racist, punitive process that doesn't serve public safety, and it actually makes communities less safe, because we're throwing folks in jail who don't need to be there, taking them away from their families, taking them away from their support systems, and taking away from the things that actually keep our community safe. So ending cash bail, which also disproportionately affects minority populations all across the country, and especially right here in Douglas County, as we've seen that 25% of our jail population is Black versus just under 5% in our community as a whole. So eliminating cash bail, additionally controlling which cases get charged in my office to begin with. We will greatly expand the use of pre-charge diversion in this county. I don't want to bring cases into that courthouse unless they absolutely have to be brought in there, because cases that get brought in there traumatize people, they traumatize families, they break families apart, and our criminal legal system cannot continue to be a cause of trauma for so many folks.
Thank you. Next, we will have question 2. What can be done to reduce recidivism? We will start with Suzanne Valdez.
Sure, I have 3 points on that. One, I think we need to the district attorney's office needs to be more of a supporter of offenders, right? So we need to incentivize offender completion of whatever it is that needs to be done in terms of accountability through incentives instead of being punitive and penalizing offenders. We really need to be supportive, and that's something that's very important to me. I also think we need to really engage in reformative justice in so many ways. Reformative justice is something that was very useful and helpful in the Crime Victims Compensation Board space. So I'm very familiar with reformative justice. It worked for victims. Victims want to engage in it, and I think they want offenders to engage in it. And I think that there's resources there for us to really come together on reformative justice in this community. And then the last thing I think we need to, that would help is, exploring criminal mediation. And sort of, again, these are just alternatives to putting people in a criminal justice system. Instead, what we're doing is we're incentivizing once the offender is accountable for whatever it is that they're facing, that we encourage them to be part of our community, to make justice, to make peace with victims and survivors, And I think that that itself is huge. All those points are huge for reducing recidivism.
Next, we have Cooper Overstreet.
Thank you. The ultimate driver of recidivism in the legal system is the barriers that our legal system has set up to success in that system. And what I mean is that so many folks, simply because of the color of their skin or because they don't have enough money, they are not as likely to succeed doing the things that the legal system requires of them. And those barriers exist right here in Douglas County right now in every aspect of the system. So as DA, my primary role is going to be to make sure that when cases are prosecuted, they can't be prosecuted giving folks unfair things that they need to accomplish in order just to get out of the system. If folks get into the system, it's going to make it more difficult for them to get out. So we need to stop folks from getting into that system to begin with. And that starts with charging and how we're deciding to charge cases. Are we charging cases based off of somebody's lack of access to resources? Or are we charging cases because we're making the community safer? I can't tell you how many times as a defense attorney that I've had clients who have been given unrealistic expectations of the things that they're supposed to do, that maybe if they were a white person with money, they could do those things, but because they're a poor person and the color of their skin isn't white, that they can't do those things. So our justice system needs to be fair and it needs to practice equity. And that means breaking down those barriers to justice and making sure that poor folks don't get brought in who don't need to be in the system to begin with.
Okay, the question we're currently talking about is what can be done to reduce recidivism? Charles Branson.
Thank you. Well, in the last 4 years, I've helped create the behavioral health court program, the women's substance use diversion program, and the drug court program. And what I've really learned is that we have to focus on increasing the availability of drug treatment and mental health treatment in our community. We have a new treatment facility, a treatment and recovery campus that'll be open in the fall. I think that's a great start, but we can't stop there. A hurdle that we face, in each one of our programs that I've mentioned is lack of stable housing. We have to restore full funding to our homeless shelter and support more affordable housing options for those that are in recovery. That is a major hurdle to everybody that's in one of those programs. It's not a hurdle that we've put up by having somebody charged, but it's a hurdle that they face just in recovery. We've seen some amazing successes in our women's substance use diversion program. When I started the program, there was a reason it was limited to women, because we have an inpatient treatment facility in our community. And that facility, First Step at DECA, is a great facility. And that program couldn't exist without the existence of that facility. We have to invest in an inpatient treatment facility for men in our community. Currently, the only option we have if a man needs inpatient treatment is to send him to Topeka, Wichita, or Kansas City. Takes him out of our community, takes him away from family, takes him away from support services, and limits a person's chance of success. So we have to find funding alternatives for our treatment programs and increase them.
Thank you. Next, we have question 3. What would be ideal outcomes from the work of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council? We will start with Cooper Overstreet.
I think the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council needs to be completely reimagined the way that it's set up right now. That council needs to be serving the purpose of the community and protecting the community and making the community safe. And its fundamental role needs to be figuring out why our jail population is so high and why it's disproportionately Black right now. And I haven't seen that done by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. That's its fundamental role. So that means that actually bringing in stakeholders in the community, folks in the community who do the work of social justice, who are activists and advocates, who see these things every day and see the inequities in the system play out right before their very eyes. And that's what that council needs to be focused on. The time for having for councils and things like that set up just to conduct listening sessions and not engage in actual action and anti-racist policies, those days are over. We have folks who are taking to the streets in the largest protest movement this country has ever seen because they're tired of inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. What they want to see is actual results and actual action. And that means bringing folks to the table who have been for so long shut out of the decision-making process in the justice system. And so as DA, that's my first job, is to bring those groups in and to lead by their example on how we prosecute cases and how we make a more fair system in Douglas County.
Next, we have Charles Branson.
Well, you have to keep in mind that CJCC is an advisory board. It has zero power. It was created to advise the county commission. But that being said, the CJCC has 7 fairly broad goals in its strategic plan. And frankly, in my opinion, that's just way too many. I'd like to see the CJCC focus on 3 main areas, really. First, unification of our data systems between all of our law enforcement agencies, the court, the district attorney's office, and the jail. Right now, we have different computer systems that do not talk to each other and store data in different ways. And the CJCC has hired recently a data analyst to help in this area. Second, I'd like to see race data collected at all intercepts in the criminal justice system. We have to know who it is we stop, who gets arrested, and who gets charged, and what the sentences are handed down by the judge. Until we have that data, we really do not have a handle on what is creating the inequalities in our system. We have started some of that work already. All 5 of our local law enforcement agencies are participating in a STOP study being done by Northeastern University. That study started in January and will last for a year. My office started collecting race data on the cases we file, and the jails also started collecting and reporting out its race data. I think once this data is collected, I'd like to see the CJCC analyze that data and report out the disparities or trends that can be identified, so each individual agency can start digging down into those disparities and see what they can do to fix them.
Thank you. The question is, what would be ideal outcomes from the work of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council? Suzanne Valdez.
So I agree with Mr. Branson on, the CJCC's role and its purpose and goal. Since it was established in 2016, it was fairly broad, but I think there was a good faith effort by the county commission when it established the council to really look at some of these areas that are important to us in a collaborative way. And the makeup of the CJCC, I think, is fairly representative of that. However, I would like to see more individuals who have been affected by the criminal justice system and impacted by the criminal justice system have a voice on that particular council, because I think it's through hearing those voices that it's going to help drive a little bit better the goals and the outcomes. Concerning goals and outcomes, I am big on data collection, I'm big on data analysis, and I'm big on data sharing. And the CJCC now has Matt Cravens, who gave the report out fairly recently about our jail population, and it was fairly alarming when we saw that we had a very high increase in black in our black community being in the jail, much more so than the national average. So by having that information, we can look at it and we can figure out what we can do and make things better. And I think that we need to be collecting data from all sorts of various groups, sharing it so that we can do it in a collaborative way and make Douglas County better.
Thank you. Next, we have question 4. How would you address the need for inclusion, diversity, and fairness within the district attorney's office? We will start with Suzanne Valdez.
So with, my time as a prosecutor, and certainly my time as a lawyer, I'm one of very few throughout my career of 24 years. We don't have a whole lot of people of color. We need more of that. We need more people of color on the bench, and we certainly need people of color in the prosecution office. And so through my experience, I believe that is something that is very important. It's very important to this community because we need leadership in that regard. And it is my goal to hire well-trained, ethical, and diverse prosecutors and staff. And that is going to make a huge difference in public perception if indeed we do have people in our criminal justice system, right? So the perception is going to be, well, if we've got a diverse prosecution staff who come from various backgrounds and various experiences, that when we come together to hold people accountable in the criminal justice system, that it is perceived as fair. And we just don't have enough of that. And that is something that is an absolute priority for me, one that's always been on my radar because I've experienced it, and something that I think is going to go a long way in moving our community forward.
Thank you. Next, we have Cooper Overstreet.
Well, I think we get to completely reimagine what the role of a district attorney's office is. And that means that we have to completely reimagine who it is that we're hiring in a district attorney's office. Are we going to continue to hire these career prosecutors that we've seen here in Douglas County who only their number one concern is just convicting folks and not actually making a more equitable justice system? Or are we going to look outside of that? Are we going to look even outside of prosecutors in general and bring in folks into our DA's office who actually have experience doing other things in the justice system and advocating for people in the justice system? Progressive prosecutors all across this country are getting elected, and they're getting elected as, for the most part, defense attorneys who have a completely different view of the justice system, one that comes from fighting for folks who are being treated unfairly day in and day out in that system. And so as DA, I'm going to look outside of career prosecutors and folks who have just been in this system and have been part of the problem over and over and over again. And that's where the real diversity lies. Yes, our legal community it's not very diverse, and that's because there's barriers all across the board to access to the legal community, barriers to access to law schools, barriers to access to resources to get into law school. But as a DA, it's my role to be creative and find folks in the legal system who are doing the right thing and who are fighting to make our system more diverse, and that's what I'll do as DA.
The question is, how would you address the need for inclusion, diversity, and fairness within the district attorney's office? Charles Branson.
Well, I think the solution to creating inclusion, diversity, and fairness in the DA's office is really kind of twofold. First, we have to actively seek out and hire a diverse staff, not just diverse in occupation, but diverse in many ways. For example, presently, 85% of our staff is female. Over 10% of our staff is a person of color. But hiring a diverse staff in governmental office is often difficult. We typically cannot compete with the private sector for wages. Having a diverse staff is vitally important to the role we play in our community. And that's why when I was president of the Statewide Prosecutors Association, I created our first diversity committee ever in that association, for the purposes of fostering our relationships in law schools and pre-law programs to encourage diverse students to consider a career in prosecution. Second, the solution in creating a more fair and inclusive and diverse staff is really creating an internal environment of inclusion, diversity, and fairness. Last year, my staff went through 6 hours of implicit bias training. This year, all of my attorneys and victim witness coordinators went through a 5-hour trauma-informed sexual assault investigation training course. But the training is simply not enough to make sure that we're accomplishing our goals. We also have partnered with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity to train with their equity tool to make sure we're examining our policies and procedures in our office to make sure that we're intentionally seeking equity in our work. So it comes from not only hiring diverse people, having diverse experiences in our office, but then also seeking the training and guidance to make sure that the work that we're doing is being thoughtfully done in an equitable manner to make sure we're being fair to everybody.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to question number 5. What is or will be your policy for dealing with law enforcement personnel who use excessive force? Cooper Overstreet.
Thank you, Ursula. First, we need to get a citizens review board in Lawrence that actually has teeth, that's comprised of citizens who will actually have the ability to issue subpoenas, who will actually have the ability to do investigation and bring law enforcement officers in and hold them accountable for misconduct. And then as DA, my number one role is independence from that process. Our DA's office needs to be independent from law enforcement. And that's why I'm proud to not take any donations in my campaign, for example, from law enforcement organizations, because that independence is key, because I will not hesitate to investigate and charge law enforcement officers who commit misconduct. And that means bringing in outside agencies agencies, including the Department of Justice, to do those investigations as well, to maintain that independence. Additionally, I will never dismiss an allegation of abuse or misconduct against a law enforcement officer in my office unless the Citizens Review Board authorizes that dismissal. And I think that's key. And so additionally, I will have a no-call list in my office for officers who have been known to commit misconduct, including racial bias in their policing. And that list will be publicly available. And that will mean that if you're an officer and you're on that list, I will not call you as a witness on any cases that I prosecute. The citizens, the folks of Douglas County, deserve to know that their DA is not putting up with law enforcement officers who commit misconduct, because that is what has led to so many wrongful convictions, and wrongful convictions that disproportionately affect Black folks in our country.
Next, we have Charles Branson.
Well, you know, in the wake of the George Floyd murder, I challenged our local law enforcement agencies to review and compare their policies to the 8 Can't Wait policies. I met with them over several days to discuss how to update and revise their policies to embrace the goals of 8 Can't Wait. You know, policies that have proven, when adopted, to reduce the chances of violent police encounter. I was pleased to see that each one of our local law enforcement agencies took me up on the challenge and produced their policies on use of force. I have encouraged and counseled our law enforcement agencies to adopt and use outside agencies to review investigations for use of force. That is the norm with my office and my expectations of law enforcement, and they have complied with that. I also have a policy that if any attorney in my office has concerns about the use of force, law enforcement that they see in reports or on videos or body cameras or anything like that, they also have to report that to me, and I'll make sure the incident is reported to supervisors of the officer in question. And finally, you know, there are circumstances where you know, an officer has crossed the line and used excessive force, and criminal charges should be filed. In the last several years, I have had the occasion to have to do that. I filed charges against an officer who used excessive force in reacting to a battery suspect, and I also filed charges against an officer that used their weapon instead of their taser. You know, we take those things very seriously. We expect law enforcement to take it very seriously.
Thank you. The question is, what is or will be your policy for dealing with law enforcement personnel who use excessive force? Suzanne Valdez.
So law enforcement, and that includes prosecutors, are not above the law. And I mean, I think that's something that needs to be established very clearly. I think it's if you're an ethical prosecutor, if you are an ethical law enforcement officer, people understand that and appreciate it. We are in horrible times right now as a result of what's happened in our country, and it is a pivotal time. It is a time for us to move forward, and I believe that law enforcement, in my discussions with them, want to move forward, and they also recognize that excessive force has been used. It's been used against people of marginalized communities, in particular our Black communities. So there is an acknowledgement and a recognition that this is not okay. There's also acknowledgement and recognition that those officers who are bad apples, just like prosecutors who are bad apples, are going to be held accountable, and they're not above the law. And so I believe that accountability is important. I also believe that the community, in order to have public trust in the prosecution office and law enforcement, because we have to work collaboratively to keep our communities safe and to make sure that people are treated fairly. I think a citizen review board is important, and I think there needs to be a separation in these kinds of cases because they're very difficult, but we need to hold people accountable.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to question number 6. What is your position on legalizing marijuana? We'll start with Charles Branson.
Well, a great question. You know, at least 33 states have decriminalized or legalized marijuana for either medical or recreational purposes. Every state around the state of Kansas has taken steps to change their marijuana laws. Kansas City, Missouri just recently struck possession of marijuana from its city ordinances. Whether you support legalization of marijuana or not, legalization will come to Kansas eventually. And marijuana is just like alcohol. It's an addictive substance, and we must be prepared in our community to address this as a substance abuse issue and not a criminal issue. We also have to recognize that simple possession has been used as a policing tool against minorities and the poor in our community. That has to stop. Last October, I became the first district attorney in Kansas and remain the only district attorney in Kansas to pledge not to file charges of simple possession of marijuana. And I did that while I was actually president of the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association, which was a bold move, not necessarily appreciated by a lot of my colleagues, but it was a move that I felt needed to be taken in our community.
Next, we have Suzanne Valdez.
So I agree with a lot of what Mr. Branson has said on the possession, and I think that we're starting to see the sort of the wave, right? So of acceptance, and certainly not charging these cases for possession and viewing the use like alcohol, and thinking about it from that perspective. And if addiction is a problem, that we face it, but it's something that we need to recognize could happen and could eventuate. I also think, though, we need to draw a distinction between possession and drug and marijuana that's used with intent to distribute or sell in large quantity. And the reason I think it's an important distinction is because what we've seen in the national landscape is that when you have possession with an intent to distribute at that kind of level to sell, it can be problematic. Usually it's a criminal enterprise where there's guns, there's sex trafficking, there's violence. And those kinds of situations, we need to be very clear between the distinctions between use, personal use, and again, quantities where it's going to be sold and where there could be other really dangerous conduct and behavior going on. So I just want to make that a clear point here, because in that kind of space, I think it's important for the prosecutor's office to take a role in ensuring community safety.
The question is, what is your position on legalizing marijuana? Cooper Overstreet.
Thank you. The criminalization of marijuana in this country is one of the biggest drivers of mass incarceration in this country, and it's one of the biggest, most harmful things that has been done to communities of color in this country ever. Personally, I support the legalization of marijuana. I think that we're seeing all across this country what's happening when folks are starting to wake up and realize that they've been sold this narrative that marijuana is violent and that it causes destruction and death in our communities, which has actually just been perpetuated to advance the war on drugs, which has decimated Black populations in this country. We see one state over in Colorado, it's legal. And to say that, and it's very much still illegal here in Douglas County, which is, I'd have to disagree with Mr. Branson, as I have clients being prosecuted by his office for legally possessing and buying marijuana in Colorado, one state over, and then being charged as attempting to distribute it, Black clients here in Douglas County. And that's exactly the reason why it needs to be legal everywhere in every state, because how can we say that our justice system is fair when the same thing done one state over is legal and then right here in Douglas County it's illegal? And the racial bias that exists in policing based off of marijuana related laws is staggering. A Black male in this country is 4 times more likely to be arrested for a marijuana related offense versus a white kid that lives in the suburbs. That is startling. So I support the legalization of marijuana. As DA, I will do everything I can to make sure that the war on drugs is ended in Douglas County and that it's treated like a public health crisis.
Thank you. Next, we have question 7. If you had the ability to change state statutes that are restricting your ability to be more effective, what would you change? We'll start with Cooper Overstreet.
Well, the legislation regarding criminal justice reform in this state has been, as a defense attorney, we have advocates in the defense community that go to the legislature every day and advocate for changing laws, and it's actually getting more punitive, which is very distressing. Laws that don't take into account an individual's specific circumstances in this state are what have caused our jail populations to grow and grow at exponential rates. So the idea that we can have mandatory sentences for certain offenses, and that we can have mandatory minimum sentences for certain offenses, which we still have on a lot of offenses here in Kansas, and not give discretion in case-by-case basis to various individuals to make that determination, those laws need to be changed. Additionally, cash bail is a major driver of mass incarceration, and we need a bail reform act in this state right now. A bail reform act that will do away with cash bail and that will put a system in place that doesn't punish folks just because they don't have money and doesn't keep them in jail because they don't have money. I've seen so often in my practice folks that even though their bond, the cash bail that they've given is only $500, that might as well be $5 million for them because they're not going to be able to post it. Whatever would be the purpose of giving somebody a $500 cash bond unless it's just to keep them in jail and punish them so you can try to get them to take a better plea. That needs to not happen, and we need legislation right now to reform our bail system in this state. And that would be something that I would advocate for directly as district attorney.
Next, we have Charles Branson.
Well, one of the things I would start with would be really eliminating the required mandatory minimum sentences in misdemeanor cases and revise our sentencing guidelines in felony cases. We have over a dozen misdemeanor crimes that if a person is found guilty, the law requires either a minimum fine or a minimum amount of jail time. These required fines and jail time can have a huge disparate impact on poor minorities in our community, and rarely are the fines and jail time really reflective of the actual conduct. But the legislature has chosen to create a minimum framework that gets applied to these crimes. Years ago, I eliminated our diversion application fees and discretionary fines in our office, and we avoid mandatory minimums wherever we can because of those impacts. However, I have no authority to waive court filing fees or mandatory fines or lab fees. Only the judge can waive those things. Changing the law to eliminate those mandatory fines, minimum fines and fees would give us more flexibility in creating appropriate outcomes in our cases. Our sentencing guidelines, again, also need to be overhauled. Currently, there's 90 sentencing categories in our non-drug sentencing guideline, and there's 45 categories in our drug guideline. Those control the sentences the court can give on a particular charge. Our current guidelines create punishments that may not fit particular facts of the crime and cause really our prosecutors and defense attorneys spend most of their time negotiating and arguing over what crime was committed in an effort to alleviate the effects of the standard penalties contained in those guidelines.
The question is, if you had the ability to change state statutes that are restricting your ability to be more effective, what would you change? Suzanne Valdez.
I agree with Cooper Overstreet that you need to, in order to eliminate cash bail, it's the legislature that has to do it. The DA's office can't do it unilaterally. I also agree with Mr. Branson that we need to do something about these sentencing guidelines. What I'd like to focus on is juvenile offenders and how we are treating our young people and our youth. And having represented youth in juvenile offender cases and as serving as the pro tem judge handling the juvenile offender docket for 8 months, I saw it was very troubling to me to see young people, youth, especially Latino and Black youth in our juvenile system. And we've gone from a rehabilitative to punitive back and forth. And I think it's a really horrible way to look at and how we treat our youth. It really adds to the high school to prison pipeline, keeping people in our system. It goes to recidivism as adults. And we got to figure out a way how to address issues related to our youth. And so if I had the opportunity to just really have a clean slate on how we looked at treatments of our young people, that would be wonderful. And I would be something that I'd be very excited to do, because we really need to focus on our future of our country in a way that makes sense.
Next, we have question 8, which is our last question. What is needed to improve efficiency in the district attorney's office? We will start with Suzanne Valdez.
So I have 3 points I'd like to make. I think we need to have, and these are the things that I've been running on in terms of my platform, we need to have transparent and clear guidelines on how cases are going to be processed, so that defense counsel and those in the criminal justice system understand how these cases are going to be treated, and they're treated fairly and equitably. I also think we need to have consistency on how justice is meted out. And again, I think that goes to this belief, this not having public trust that all of this is fair. Certainly, we've seen that it isn't fair in light of what we've seen in our jail population, I think. And lastly, I think we need to have better communications with law enforcement, with our community stakeholders, with people who have been impacted by crime. All of those folks who really care about changing our criminal justice system and moving it forward in a way that is progressive, in the sense that we're trying to keep people with their families, keep people in the community, keep people with their jobs, all of those things, keeping the jail population low, at the same time keeping our community safe and keeping violent offenders accountable. I also want to make sure that we really give attention and a voice to those who have been victims and survivors of crime, because they are harmed. They're harmed irreparably in many instances, and those voices really, really matter. And I think we need to give more, more focus on that as well.
Next, we have Cooper Overstreet.
Our complete legal system that we have right now needs to be reimagined. And that means in order for a DA's office to run more efficiency, I guess we need to determine what is the metric of success that we're looking at. Do we need to be more efficient at ruining people's lives and sending folks to jail that shouldn't be sent there? Or do we need to be more efficient at making our community safer and healthier by keeping folks out of jail to begin with? And so the first step in that is, my prosecutors are not going to be spending all of their time in court making bond arguments, trying to keep folks in jail who can't afford to get out. That goes back to eliminating cash bail. My prosecutors instead are going to be focusing on keeping cases out of the system to begin with. The system isn't efficient, and because it's not fair. And when you have a lack of fairness, you always have a lack of efficiency. And so we need to reevaluate completely what our metrics of success are as DAs. And that means not having career prosecutors who are just focusing on convictions and not actual humans in the system. Another part of that is having policies of transparency and accountability, and making sure that the public knows that as DA, I am their elected official. I am the most powerful elected official in the county, and they need to know that, and they need to be able to hold me accountable and my office accountable. So that means first and foremost, having policies set in place that are going to address that accountability, creating a court watch program so they can come in and watch how my prosecutors are litigating cases, and making sure that we're not spending vast amounts of resources and money keeping poor folks and people of color in the jail.
The question is, what is needed to improve the efficiency in the district attorney's office? Charles Branson.
Well, we've taken a lot of steps over the years to try to increase efficiency in the office by trying to make sure the people that are in the criminal justice system belong there, and trying to exclude those who do not. Trying to make sure people have pathways out of the criminal justice system, like our behavioral health court programs. Some of the biggest obstacles and hurdles, though, that we really face are pretty basic. We need increased funding for testing services and expanded lab facilities. Many times we have evidence that has to be tested for the presence of illegal substance, DNA, or other lab requirements. And we continue to face a backlog through the Kansas Bureau of Investigation's labs. In major cases, law enforcement is restricted to only being able to submit 10 lab items at a time. And it's ridiculous. That causes long delays in us being able to get cases reviewed and charged and into the courtroom. As district attorney, I'm faced all the time with having to make the decision of whether to charge a case immediately and then delay the case after it's been filed, or get lab results and wait months to get those lab results before we charge a case. We also have to fully fund and expand the defense bar of Douglas County. Years of underfunding of our defense bar has created fewer lawyers willing to take on the work. Our present defense bar does not have enough lawyers to handle the volume of cases in Douglas County, and a fully funded defense bar would ideally be able to make defense attorneys available at first appearances when bond decisions are being made, and we allow for faster resolutions and decreasing our caseloads.
Thank you. Next, we will have closing remarks. We will start with Charles Branson.
Well, I really want to thank you, Ursula, Sarah in the background, and AACP for hosting this event. It's really important. It's a very important local election, and I want to thank everybody for watching. The district attorney's job is to uphold the laws of the state of Kansas. It's about protecting victims of crime. It's about bringing justice to family members of murder victims and protecting the most vulnerable in our community from predators. Being district attorney is also about being a leader and serving your community by being a problem solver and making sure that justice is done fairly and equitably. It's a position where hard decisions have to be made every day. Being a progressive leader requires more than just a vision or resolve or empty promises. It requires experience. Only through experience can we create meaningful and lasting change in our system. It takes time, persistence to develop successful programs, to build trust and relationships, and to forge new paths. It has to be done by a leader that has experience and innovative ideas to work within the system to create that change. Over the last 15 years, I have continually adapted and changed our office to meet the needs and expectations of our community. And I will not talk just about change. I will not make you campaign promises that I do not have the power to fulfill. I will take concrete action to continue to improve our system so that justice can be obtained fairly for all. I'm Charles Branson. I'm your district attorney, and I'm asking for your vote again on August 4th. Thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have Cooper Overstreet.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you to the NAACP for putting on this great forum. It's a great opportunity to talk about the issues that matter for everyone in Douglas County. Folks in this country right now, all across this country, are taking to the streets. And the largest protest movement that we've seen in the history of this country, a protest movement strictly and fundamentally based on the differences in treatment of our minority communities in this country. And what those folks are not asking for is they're not asking for the people who are in power right now to work within the system. They're demanding a whole new system in our legal community. We need to reimagine how justice is done, because right now what is happening, the status quo is the status quo of racism, of inequity, and of destroying communities and destroying lives. So as DA, what I will do is I will reimagine that system, and that's what needs to happen right now. We need progressives. We need a movement to take hold right now, and we need folks in this county to step in and join in that movement. Things like eliminating cash bail, things like creating conviction and integrity units, things like ending the war on drugs can only be done by direct action. Studies and sessions to get us answers that we already know that our system is racist aren't going to get us there. We need direct action, and we need leaders who will listen to folks in the community who are engaging in direct action and follow their example. And that's what I'll do as DA. Our criminal legal system is broken here, and we need to reimagine how justice is done. We need to focus on humans and not convictions, and we need activists and advocates in position of power. That's really how we do it. The old way of doing things is no more. We need new vision and we need new ideas, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for district attorney on August 4th. Thank you so much. Everybody, if you want to learn more about my campaign, go to my website, votecoot.com, and I look forward to having your vote on August 4th.
Next, we have Suzanne Valdez.
Thank you, Ursula and the NAACP. It's time for a change in the district attorney's office. Mr. Branson's part of the system that needs to be changed. We need new leadership, we need experience, and we need smart change. And I can provide all three of those things for you. Please look at my website, learn who I am. I've talked a little bit about who I am and my experience, and I think it's time that we move forward as a community. I think everyone that I've talked to wants to move forward as a community. The position of district attorney is a job. It is a law enforcement job. And for someone to say it's the most powerful job in this community really is scary. For this job to be done in a way that makes sense for community change, it's going to require restraint, it's going to require deliberation, it's going to require communication, it's going to require a listening heart, it's going to require all of those things to make change and to lead change. It has nothing to do with power. It has to do with doing the right thing. So I hope that you all take what I'm saying to heart, because that's very, very important to me. This job requires the lawyer to be experienced in prosecution, which I have. It requires you to maintain and hire a diverse office. I've done that too. I've managed an office with the Crime Victims Compensation Board. I've managed a budget. I know where money goes. I know how it can be spent. I know how to do it effectively. The deliverables you can get from me, the promises that you get from me is you've got my record. You've got my record. It's a strong record. It's a diverse record. It's been defense work. It's been prosecution work. It's ethics work. You can get deliverables from me are a straight shooter, a communicator, and a collaborator, and someone who really wants to make change. So please vote for me on August 4th and visit my website at suzanne4da.com. And I look forward to serving as your district attorney, and I hope that I have your trust to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. The Lawrence Branch NAACP would like to thank Suzanne Valdez, Cooper Overstreet, and Charles Branson for speaking at our candidate forum. And thanks to all who attended. I have one quick reminder. Tuesday, July 14th is the last day to register to vote for the primary election. So remember to get yourself registered and definitely remember to get out to vote. Thank you very much.